All right. Good evening. Tonight is June 21st, 2023 at 7 p.m. This is a special called Town Council meeting. If you would, please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilman Jones, if you'd please lead us in prayer.
I would. If you would, please bow your heads. Father God, we come before you in a world with trials and tribulations, and help us to remember where our allegiance really lies to our God, our family, our country. And we thank you for the town that we have, for each of our citizens, for each business we have. And although we have our ups and downs, let us to remember the many blessings that are afforded to us, the liberties that we have. Help us to recall and be thankful for the June 6th invasion of Normandy that seemed to fly by without anybody recognizing it, formerly referred to as D-Day. And help us to get our thoughts in order as July the 4th rolls around so we can celebrate our Independence Day. And we ask that you give us, this council, the wisdom we need to make the decisions necessary for the town of Stokesdale's business. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Tim. Next up is review and adopt the agenda. Entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll make a motion, we adopt the agenda as written.
I'll second that motion.
All right, I'll call question. Jim?
Aye.
I'm aye. Jimmy?
Aye.
Tim?
All right.
All right, passes. Next up, we have citizens' comments from the floor. If anybody would like to speak, please do so. Okay, we have no citizens' comments from the floor. Next, next up on the agenda is the public hearing. We are continuing the public hearing from June 8th of 2023 concerning the proposed operating budget for the town of Stokesdale for next fiscal year. At this time, we will open it up, and if anybody would like to speak with anything in favor of the budget, against the budget, any comments about the budget, anything you don't like, anything's fair game here. It's a public hearing. So please, if you feel so moved, please take the stand. And Robbie, we don't have a mic up there.
Correct, I've got it right here.
Okay. Okay. Last call for anybody out here that may want to speak.
Aaron, you're not gonna get me a raise? All right, well,
Okay.
You scared she might actually start talking,
yeah, I know,
tell us all she knows?
that's okay.
Seeing that there's nobody that would like to speak, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing. I'll make that motion if it needs to be made, that we officially close the public hearing.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, any discussion? I'll call question. Jim?
Aye.
I'm aye. Jimmy?
Aye.
And Tim?
Aye.
All right, that brings us to new business. Item number 5 is consideration and approval of operating budget ordinance for fiscal year 23/24. Just start off by saying the town did have 4 budget workshops for the budget next year. And of course, the public was free to attend any budget workshop. We started in March, had one in March, April, May, and June. It is my opinion after these workshops and hearing citizen input as well as other council members' input, most importantly, staff's input, and thank them for putting this together, that it's my opinion that we're in a good place for next year's budget. I'll leave my comments at that for now, and guys, if you have any comments, concerns, questions, please feel free to do so.
Well, Mr. Foy, I want to express my reservations about this budget in terms of it includes what we refer to as the free money, which is grant money from higher government, which in part includes money that was simply printed and spent into our economy, which has caused a high inflation that our citizens are suffering under. My chief concern with voting for this budget is that when next year rolls around, that we won't be able to back up to a reasonable budget level because we've gotten addicted to spending this amount of money versus the previous budgets. There's 3 open council seats, and I realize that we may have 3 new council members, and that's great. Town of Stokesdale has long since lost its sales tax distribution money that was taken without notice and without cause by the Guilford County Commissioners, and they have not entertained our pleas to discuss returning it. So that's my concern in voting for this budget. I would like to be able to point to some line item for $10,000 or 15 or more that I think needs to be cut out of the budget, but it seems to continually creep up. Me, myself, I'd be willing to take out half the light bulbs or do without some things here to keep our citizens from having to pay a property tax, but that kind of viewpoint is not shared by everybody I know. But I come into contact with quite a number of citizens out there that live in Stokesdale that they're kind of strapped. They're paying high gas bills, high grocery bills, trying to get over the economic slowdown we had from COVID. And at the same time, the county is letting us know that they may reassess values and raise property taxes again. And this just doesn't feel good to me sitting here having to vote on this thing. So,
I agree with a lot of the points that you made. Your first point about the free money, the grant money. That's there's no doubt that is a direct correlation with inflation these days, which obviously is hitting us all. It is money that the town does have, and I think that there are plans to make good use of that money. I'll speak on one project here in the next item. As far as this year's just general fund budget, you look at total revenue and expenses, we're budgeting, $459,000 in general fund money. I'll acknowledge that we are reimbursed for shared overhead expenses, but what was this year's general fund when you look at from a revenue standpoint?
Sorry, I was not ready for that. Excuse me, I will find it though.
you probably need your microphone, Ms. Thacker.
Okay. I said, I'm sorry, I was not ready for that question. Excuse me 1 second. It'll take me just a second to get in there. I have to change my password today. I forgot it. Okay.
Kim, you can go to the website and pull it up. I might just do that myself.
Okay, I got it, finally. I'm sorry, I was looking for our actual.
Okay.
Even though, I know we were talking about the budget. For 22-23, our budget, total revenue budget, was $814,737.50, of which $362,737.50 was from the American Rescue Plan that was included in the operational budget for the 23 fiscal year. And none of our money is included in this fiscal year coming up.
Is there any way you could just give me the figure for the revenue for anything that's not related to a grant? I'm trying to do an apples to apples comparison.
Yes, I can. I can subtract this out of here.
And I promise I'm making a point in a minute.
I got you. $452,000.
So an is it a true statement that an apples to apples comparison year over year would be 452 for the current year we're in? Next year is 459 if I'm looking at this budget.
Yes.
And it is my opinion that, looking at every line item, that, that it's a good budget, but I don't think there's any fluff anywhere. If there's any fluff, it's possibly in the maintenance, lawn maintenance, but there's not much there. I would say that in terms of a one-time unique expense, there's $32,000 in the recodification of our ordinance that certainly we wouldn't expect to be recurring. And I would acknowledge that inflation is hitting the town and all of our expenses, just like it's hit everybody else in their pocketbooks. I do want to give hats off to Jim and Jimmy for negotiating another year at the same rate with the vendor that does our lawn maintenance. We're getting a very fair value considering when that contract was first executed, that was pre the inflation figures that we're seeing today. So to continue that is a good win for us. And the same goes with Hunter Enterprises. And I mentioned those two because those are two large expenses for the town. So, I mean, anything that Tim said, I mean, I do agree with, that the expenses are going up and, and how that impacts all the citizens. In terms of the free money, I think it's our duty to, be as careful as we can with it and, to ensure that it's impactful for the town of Stokesdale for years to come. And hopefully that there won't be too much added recurring cost due to those, which, in my opinion, there shouldn't be much. There will be some. I don't dispute that. But those are good points that Tim made. Jim, you got anything, guys?
No, I agree. Looking at the budget, we've certainly been fortunate to have some money, regardless of how it came down to us or how it got generated, but we're making good use of that for the citizens, and I think that's important to note. As far as the regular budget minus any grant funding, I think we're right in line where we have been the last 3 or 4 years, consistently, staying right there. Obviously, staff improvements and things like that have run the budget up a little bit, benefits, but I think that's the cost of having a good staff is good benefits. So I'm pleased with the budget myself. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Jim.
Well, everybody knows I'd like to cut the budget down to little to nothing, but we do a good job as a town. I don't know how many towns are operated that have a park and water system and all that don't have a property tax.
Zero.
We've been doing this now for over 30 years, I guess. And it's a good thing. I think more towns could operate like us. I think they could use it as a model. I think some of us have done what we said we was going to do, build the park a little bit if we could get some, money without going into our savings. We've done that. Before the end of the year, you're going to see a couple projects done. Basketball court, pickleball court. And I know that's with that money that we had with grants, but that was kind of our goal. Was mine, and I think some of the other guys that got elected too, to build the park with that type of money instead of taxing. It would be easy to run this town with a tax. If we could throw a 10-cent tax like some other folks have, if we could run this town, we could have people lined up everywhere working back to back, and I don't know what they'd be doing, but they could be back there. And it's not hard to take other people's money out of their pocket and run something. We don't do that. We try to stretch our dollars. We've got money that the government's handed down to us. We have to spend it, and we're doing the best we can. We've been open and transparent. We've got it on video. We've broadcast it out to everybody. We've had meetings. We're not doing anything in the back doors. So I just, I think we've done a good job. And I hope that the next council will
continue on with the tradition. Like I said, it'd be easy to get elected to this, and now I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. You can do it by picking people's pockets. There's people around that probably wouldn't even notice if you picked their pockets, but there's a lot here in town that, a tax wouldn't be the best thing for them. You can look in Greensboro and see all the foreclosures that are lined up, people that can't pay their taxes. If they could pay their taxes, they'd be paying their taxes. So, guy's got 10 million, it's not gonna hurt him, or, maybe even $1 million, but, some of the other folks, it will. So, like I say, guys, we did a good job. We've been, we've had meetings, we've had it out in there. I'd love to have more people here to, witness it, but I don't know how many is witnessing it, with the videos. But, sometimes I think, well, maybe we're not doing too bad a job because nobody's coming down here, getting down our throats. And maybe we're doing such a bad job, just nobody wants to show up. I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is. But, I'm glad to be here, glad to be part of it. And, like I say, hopefully the next bunch that comes in will, keep the tradition up. Because it's here, and once you do away with it, once you stop, it's over. Then you'll be just like everybody else. That's what you want to be. There's lots of everybody else's out there. If you want to be everybody else, you'll be with everybody else. We're unique. So thanks, staff, and thanks, council.
I think Mr. Landers made a good point, and maybe about 6 months ago, when he talked about the town's reserves as being the inheritance for our kids, and we needed to be careful how we spend it. I too feel that way. I think that was a good comparison. Any three people could blow the town's budget, bloat it up to $2 or $3 million and spend what's in the bank fairly quickly. And I'm not necessarily saying it would be wasted depending on what they bought with it, but it certainly would be gone. The investment earnings that we have projected being at $85,000, is that, what can you do as to reassure me as a council member that that is an accurate estimate? I know we can't predict the future. I know rates are going up a little bit. That is a number that I watch in our budgets. Once our reserves are drawn down, of course, that $85,000 we're receiving in interest money will, or whatever it may be at that point in time, will be gone. And so what's the town getting on our money at the moment as far as a rate of return? If you had to just shoot from the hip and put a number on it.
We are estimating between, right now, 2.71 and 3.69. Anytime that we have renewed any of the CDRs, we are renewing them at a year for 12 months. And those are renewing at 3.69 at this time. And let me go back to this report here. Derek, if you want to chime in on anything while I'm
No, I
looking
mean,
something up here.
I agree with your 369. I think if we can talk, a little bit about when I think a lot of these mature in February, March timeframe, and then 3.69 of what?
Let's see, we've got 2.5. Well, at that time, the 3.69, when we renew, bear with me.
What's the total amount we have that are invested in CDRs just for the general?
Just for the general fund is $2,592,000. And I know that we actually lowballed that number when we, yeah, we were conservative on that. I actually think we did 3.
So to answer Tim's question,
82.
She ran the numbers when we were putting that down. I remember.
Oh, certainly. I'm not.
It was really low, and we raised it up because I think pretty much what you got right now the rates you got right now, wasn't that right around what it would be for a year?
Yes, because the ones we have, for instance, just in the month of, I wish I had that report with me. Just in the month of, May, we made over $8,000. Did I say that right?
I don't know, it
Look at my
seems high.
reports. Yeah, I don't wanna say that and not just scratch that. Don't put that in the minutes.
I mean, that may be right. It's $96,000 annualized. Seems high,
And
but
for anybody that may be listening, the town is required to invest the town's money in certain investment vehicles that are approved by the state treasurer, so it's not like we can go out and buy stocks and bonds and attempt to get a higher rate, not that we would want to, but that's just the way it is.
Yes. In the general fund alone, for the month of May, our interest was $7,927, just for the month of May.
And there's no reason for it to go down unless we take money out, correct? Because all the rates are,
That's
we're
right.
not gonna lose any rates, everything's going up.
No, because when we did renew these, they were renewed, like I said, for 12 months. And I know that on the balance sheet, I always have the renewal dates on there. Let me find that, right here it is. Let's see. A lot of these do not renew until 2024. We have a few, 1, 2, 3. We have 3 that will renew in November of '23 of this $2,592,000 that I'm referencing.
what are those currently at?
Those are currently at 2.71 and 2.9.
What was the last one we renewed at?
3.68.
So if you annualize that May figure that you had, you know, that's $95,000 times 12. $95,124, and what's budgeted is $85,000.
Right.
I think it's a pretty reasonable budget.
Okay, thank you for addressing that. I think that was helpful to me.
I'd like to make a motion that that we adopt the operating budget for FY '23, FY '24 as proposed by Finance Officer.
Yeah, I'll second.
Mr. Foy,
Yes, sir.
in the past, we have always voted on our general fund budget and our water enterprise fund budget separately. Is it your intent that your motion is for the general fund and then we will be voting on the water enterprise fund in a separate motion?
I'm happy to break them up, but my intent would be to do it all unless there's any objection.
Well, they are separate funds to
Sure
help
they
our
are.
citizens understand what we do, how we do. I think it would help them when they,
It'll help them immensely, I'm sure.
it helped them keep it separate. We need to keep it separated.
Okay. I'll make a motion that the town of Stokesdale adopt our general fund budget for FY '23-24 as presented by Finance Officer Kim Thacker.
I'll second that.
All right, is there any discussion? If not, I'll call question. Jim?
Aye.
I'm aye. Jimmy?
Aye?
And Tim?
I,
Okay, next we move to the Water Enterprise Fund. I'll start that off with a motion that we adopt the Water Enterprise budget for FY '23, FY /24 as presented to council by Finance Officer Ken Thacker.
I'll second that.
Okay, discussion? Call question. Jim?
Aye.
I'm aye. Jimmy?
Aye?
And Tim?
I,
All right, that takes care of the budget for next year. We have adopted both the general fund budget and the water enterprise budget. Next item on the agenda is the consideration of a request by Stokesdale Parks and Recreation for a $50,000 grant for lighting at the baseball fields. I requested to add this to the agenda, so I will go ahead and speak to it. Mr. Jordan Baumforth, Stokesdale Parks and Rec President, has been to 3 town council meetings. present this ask. I think we all had very good discussion, and hopefully we learned a lot of things specifically to this request. It is certainly my intent to vote for this, as I do see it being a great use of monies that we got from a grant, and the public purpose is certainly there, given that, we have 96 kids playing 130 nights a year at that field. And then, of course, they'll have their families. So, we're looking between 300 and 400 folks at that field, 130 nights a year. And the fact of the matter is that their lighting is in dire straits right now. Whether some of their lighting they've replaced some of their lighting, but the lighting they've replaced is on poles that are, they're really on their last leg. And we saw picture evidence of that in the June 8th meeting. I believe Jordan showed that up on the big screen. The Parks and Recreation also did hear our concerns about the sustainability of that field being a community park as it was designed to be years and years and years ago. And Parks and Recreation has amended their bylaws to put some of those protections in place. I was very impressed with that. So the request from Parks and Rec is not just that we simply hand them a $50,000 check for the project. It's that they first must raise $25,000 designated to this fundraising initiative, and show evidence that the money's raised is tied to this specific project. They're going to be getting. They raise money through other sources not related to this project, such as registration fees, but that doesn't count towards this project. I think it's a great community initiative that Stokesdale Parks and Rec can lead, and I think the town participating in it would be a good thing. And again, we certainly have the grant money to do it, and one could make the argument. I guess I'll try to make the argument that if the town had historically run those baseball fields, or owned and operated those baseball fields, that the cost of operation between, hiring somebody to mow the grass, drag the fields, and maintain the bathrooms, the electricity, the trash, I think minimum you'd be looking at $40,000 to $50,000 annually there if the town had operated that. So I do think that has been a savings to the taxpayers by not having the town to operate it, not to mention that the town would just simply screw it up. We wouldn't do nearly as good of a job as Stokesdale Parks and Recreation can do. I do want to acknowledge Miss Liz Cagno. She's the Vice President of Stokesdale Parks and Recreation. Liz, there's really no questions I have for you. I wanted to thank you for being present, if any of the guys have any questions, but I intend to make a motion that we get this initiative started. So thank you for being here. Gentlemen?
Well, you didn't leave much for anybody to say. But I do want to say that the ballpark, the Parks and Rec is a great organization. They've been a big part of the community, even before we had a government in this community. And I hope it stays that way. I don't see that I want the five guys that's sitting up here running the Parks and Rec ever. And you're right, we would have spent a lot of money. The town would have spent a lot of money. They've raised money over the years, raised money, I guess, to get it. And it's a great situation. It's another thing that makes our town great. We don't put a tax on anybody, to do that. This is grant money, and they're a big part of the town. And I can't think of anything any better. I mean, we could put some more playground equipment, but why not fix the lights? So I'm all for it. That.
Thank you, Jimmy. Are there any other comments from council?
Well, I was waiting on a motion to be made.
Sure, I'll be happy to make that. I'll go ahead and make a motion. I make a motion for the town of Stokesdale to participate in a fundraising campaign with Stokesdale Parks and Recreation, a 501c nonprofit located in Stokesdale, by matching $2 for every $1 raised by Stokesdale Parks and Recreation, specific to this fundraising initiative, up to $50,000 from the town. that town money should only be used by Stokesdale Parks and Recreation to pay for lighting or light poles associated with lighting Community Park for baseball and softball games. That Stokesdale Park and Recreation's fundraising initiative must conclude by June 1st of 2024 to align with the town's fiscal budget and that Stokesdale Parks and Recreation be able to provide evidence that funds raised during this time period are specific to this fundraising initiative. And lastly, that the disbursement of the grant is contingent upon Stokesdale Parks and Recreation recording the organization's new bylaws presented to the Stokesdale Town Council on June 14th of 2023.
I'll second that one.
Okay, Mr. Foy, thank you. I think you covered all the bases. So to recap here, Stokesdale Parks and Rec has completed the application process with the town of Stokesdale. This council created a form and voted on it and put it in place, and they have completed that application process. They are going to provide invoices for this work
Yes.
before payment, after payment, or within so many days of payment.
Well, I would think they would provide the invoices after payment, but I think they have a quote, and they've locked in the quote per Jordan. So we do kind of know how much they're having to expend for these projects. And of course, some kind of proof of payment. And I'd like to address Liz to that point there. This is a requirement that we would have to show higher government because of how we've got to show proof of how we spend all grant money. So that's part of it. And just good stewardship overall for both organizations, or for both the town and your organization.
Ask another way, is there any reason why we wouldn't ask for the invoices before we gave them the money? Would that encumber Stokesdale Parks and Rec?
Are you saying as far as the estimate of what it's gonna cost?
No. Before we disperse any money, we receive the invoices from Stokesdale Parks and Rec.
Can I comment? I'm not sure if they would have the cash outlay to pay for the work to be done. Normally invoices are submitted after the work is done. So I think we would have an estimate, and I think we could see that estimate ahead of time and then see evidence of an invoice and that payment was made after.
Well, I'm just, the town had a previous experience with another nonprofit, and this didn't turn out well. I don't want to be in that same position with a larger amount of money. So if there's some way here, and I'm trying to make it easy for Parks and Rec, but if we could stipulate that we have to have the invoices within 30 days. I don't know what an appropriate period of time is, but as Mr. Foy mentioned, we do have a responsibility to have an audit path back into Stokesdale Parks and Rec for this money. It's basically a state requirement, and then a requirement of receiving the grant is that we be able to account for the money. So what's easy to do here?
Well, I would think,
I'm getting hung up on the word invoice.
I would think that they would do the
Invoice
job
statement?
and they would invoice, how much they needed to get paid, and then we could give them the money. I mean, that's what I would think. Because I know they're not gonna have $50,000 extra laying around in the Parks and Rec account to pay somebody.
Right.
Well,
And I don't want them going to the bank. That was the whole thing about changing the bylaws.
I'd just rather we disperse based on an invoice, a statement, or a proposal that's presented to us from Parks and Rec. And if we left it that way and Parks and Rec, for whatever reason, was unable to do this because of the business world we live in, then could council vote, we could vote at a later date to make the necessary change and give them whatever amount of money was necessary in advance if that became necessary. See what I'm saying?
I do. I think you're saying you're just speaking to the importance of having the paper trail,
Yes, I am. And I don't want us,
not only for our citizens, but also from the perspective
Oh, yeah.
of that
we
we're gonna
need to
be
treat everybody the same. If next year there's another nonprofit, we kind of need to get in a habit of, we've been backwards the way the town has handled disbursements to nonprofits, and we need to right the ship here.
We did have a bad experience. I think we did a couple good things by setting up a true process in place, and I think we're going to be well prepared here. Maybe prepared is not the bad word, but I think we're positioned to succeed here in terms of invoices or anything.
Well, invoice statements, proposals, contracts,
Which one?
all of the above. I just, I think it's critical that we get the necessary paperwork without having to spend money to get it.
I don't think anybody wants to write a $50,000 check if we don't get an invoice. I mean, we're, you know, she's got to pre-audit certify it, and somebody's got to sign the check,
Well,
and besides her, and that's only got one, well, when are they gonna do this? They gonna get this done before we're gone?
Well, I put a due date on there of June 1st of 2024.
Oh, well,
That's-
okay, we
that's
may
this-
not be the one signing the
That's
check.
this fiscal year. I have full faith that the organization and the community is going to come together and raise this money so that these new lights can be up by the fall season. But that's just simply my opinion.
Yeah,
That's not a
I agree.
commitment
I
Stokesdale Parks and Rec is making.
Mr. Foy, I sat here several years ago in this council seat asking similar questions and was assured that that I was out of bounds and didn't know what I was talking about, and it turned into a problem. So, I've already gotten snake bit as a council member walking in the high grass, trusting it all be sorted out. So I think now's the time to talk about it. What we need to make sure Ms. Thacker sees before she writes a check. And that, if we don't do this, Ms. Thacker, it leaves her kind of hanging.
No, I agree with, I haven't disagreed with anything you're saying. I had a question about the invoicing, and how the cash flow would work, but
What an
I
estimate,
think we're good.
I don't know, unless they're paying in advance, they're gonna have an invoice or a statement.
Yeah.
And we're not gonna write a check if we don't have an invoice. I mean, you're not gonna pre-audit certify it without it, 'cause she can't pre-audit certify it without a check.
Yeah.
Now, y'all might have done that different back when you was in here, but we don't do that. We have something to back up what we're doing.
You're right, we
Now,
did
you
with
might
four
get some
council
more folks
members
at back
and-
that wanna do it that way, but while we're here, it's going.
The record is clear in regards to my previous actions, but.
No, you're right. Nobody's disagreeing with anything you say. So what is it you want? Because that's what we wanna do. I mean, for her to pre-audit certify, she's gonna have to have an invoice. She's sitting there telling you that. And because it's on her. I mean, if she writes a check and she's, it's not,
I think the big question,
On me with the grants as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm
it's
spending
fine.
grant money plus the state money.
that too, we don't want Ms. Thacker,
No.
behind bars anywhere.
Well, she won't be either, I don't think.
So, I think
Take it all y'all with.
we'll get you out. What's clear to me here is that we need to make a stipulation that we pay for work that's completed, or else there needs to be another vote of council.
I would be happy to make that stipulation and say,
And should something change in Parks and Rec, for whatever reason, needs money in advance for this project, certainly, come see us and we'll fix it. But we need to keep, this is public money we're giving you.
To your point, you're saying you're not going to issue Parks and Rec funds in anticipation that we're gonna use it for the project. You wanna see evidence that the funds are needed for the project. I think that's what I'm hearing. I could be
That's right.
wrong. And absolutely, we wouldn't expect the town and the town's money to just go to Stokes and Parkdale Recreation under the assumption that it will be used for this project. We will supply invoices or whatever you need so you know that the funds are going to the project. So as long as that addresses your concern, yes, we will meet those requirements.
So are you saying you want the work to be completed and have an invoice in Ms. Thacker's hand? I mean, we can fix what you're talking about.
I'm saying that this may be done in stages. It might wind up having 3 invoices. And I'm saying that we need the invoice before we make a payment each way along the way.
Okay, well, I think.
If we are advancing funds for work that hasn't been done, then we need to talk about what kind of controls we might want to see under those circumstances. That's my opinion.
I don't think we said anything about advancing. Funds without an end.
I may have implied it when I talked about cash flow, so my apologies. I do agree with what Tim is saying.
No, yeah, I do too.
You did kind of imply
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
yes.
no, I just said I did.
Yeah, well, I mean, you confuse me.
Okay,
And I also don't know the expectations of the vendors that we're gonna be using. They very well may require a deposit up front to get the job started. In that case, there would be an invoice reflecting that we've made that advance payment.
And there may be progress payments theoretically along the lines too, I guess, yeah.
right.
Yeah. I just don't want to pay in advance with public money.
That makes all the sense in the world.
Okay.
I went through this with the playground vendor, and we're not paying in advance for that.
That's right. They want-
So,
they want it
I hear
all.
you, brother.
Didn't they want it all?
They wanted 50%.
Just 50%?
That wasn't
They
gonna-
wanted it all. I can't remember.
That wasn't gonna fly.
But we do appreciate the acknowledgement that there may be invoices that we don't have the funds to pay, obviously,
Yeah.
through the Stokesdale Park and Rec current bank balance, and we may, of course, obviously need the funds from the town to move forward with the initiative.
Yeah. I think we're good here.
You think we're good?
Can I get a little,
I mean, they've got to raise a chunk of money as well. And I don't think there's anything that would, if July 15th, they've raised $15,000 and they need, to progress in their project, but they still want to raise more money up to that 25 or even more. I don't think there would be anything, as long as they provided the paperwork, that would disallow a disbursement of a 2-for-1 match for what they raised at that standpoint. In other words, they don't need to, I wouldn't envision them needing to wait until the end of their fundraiser.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly, like Mr. Winfrey just pointed out, I'm all for being willing to have the town make progress payments, but advancing funds ahead of work is something that we need to have some strings attached to. We need to see signed contracts and have some understanding of what's being done with the town's money. So, okay. I guess I'm good.
I agree.
can I just ask for a clarification? So your motion provided that this, a prerequisite was the recording of restrictions related to the Stokesdale Parks and Rec's use of the property, is my understanding. And I watched the minutes or the Mr. Baumforth's statements at your last meeting, where I wasn't here, but I did see the YouTube of that. And thank you for sending that to me. And he indicated that their plan was to put the bylaws that they had recently adopted, including the 2 restrictions, on record. Typically, those aren't recorded at the Register of Deeds office, and so my suggestion would be, if you wanted to, just to say that there would be adequate submissions documenting the bylaws as it applies to this property on record before this money gets paid out.
Mr. Winfrey, would it be appropriate to have the board all sign a document stating we've changed the bylaws and certify that, these bylaws are the current bylaws?
Well,
We, the undersigned, certify that we've made this change. Is that feasible?
that is feasible. I'm not sure it gets us quite where I'd like to be. Where I'd like to be is have perhaps a restriction, to have Stokesdale Parks and Rec put something like a restriction on the property saying these restrictions, limiting it to nonprofit use, and typically for the benefit of Stokesdale, pretty much incorporate their reference, have that go on record, which they could do unilaterally, just file as a restriction on the property, so that we know that, in the future, and you could have it expire in 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, whenever you wanted to have it expire. I think that would be, the bylaws themselves could be amended at any time.
So this would be like a short form memo that would be recorded?
Well,
that, of
or if
course.
you're familiar with like HOA, it's like if a developer puts restrictions on property to say, this property is only gonna be used for X purpose or limited purposes. So
Okay.
I would view it as like a restriction on the property.
Hasn't, not restricting it to the property, but don't the bylaws themselves, with the bylaw changes, it was my understanding that 2 items could not be changed with that.
Right, in other words, if I were gonna be a slick lawyer and try to find loopholes in this, I would say, well, they could amend the part that allows for amendments. In other words, Article 12, which he referred to, says you have to have they can't amend the previous one dedicated to Stokesdale's use. But you could change Article 12 to say it could be done, and that would only take a simple majority of the board to do that. So my preference, again, would be just have it as a restriction on the property itself, that these are the restrictions that the board has attached to this property.
Okay, it's commonly referred to by us laymen as a deed restriction.
Correct.
Seems simple.
Yeah, and I'd be glad to work with them to figure out the mechanics of doing that.
I like that.
And the town of Stokesdale could always, in the future, if the town wanted to waive that restriction and say you're free to do whatever with you want, a future town council could do that.
A future town council would be able to make a change if it was necessary for the best interest of everybody concerned at all.
They could waive any rights they had in that restriction.
Well, if you get that many people together doing something, it's not much you're gonna do anyway.
I'm sorry.
I say if you get that many people together trying to do something they ought not to be doing, it's gonna be.
Well, Mr. Floyd, would you be interested in modifying your motion to
No,
add
I'm
the deed restriction?
I'm struggling with this a little bit.
I mean, if they
I'm
say
I'm
that they're-
struggling with it because it hasn't been offered up front like the bylaws were
Point
by the
taken.
organization.
Is
You
there-
know,
if we had to back up on this in July, do you think that would impede the Parks and Rec Board's operations? I mean, Mr. Bomfort seems very flexible when he comes here, but I haven't spoken to any other board members, so I don't know.
well, I would just tie it to fall ball starting around Labor Day. You know, I mean, he just compared this to an HOA.
I think he meant,
I
he
know
meant
what he
legally,
meant.
he didn't
know
mean
what he meant,
any
but-
offense.
I mean, I think that's a decision the organization needs to make themselves, and I'm not so sure if, I mean, the grant itself has merit. I'm not so sure if I want to tie that restriction to them in this motion.
Well, it's something, it's no surprise to anybody, because this board has been discussing this very same thing. Mr. Winfrey has, rendered these options for Stokesdale Town Parks and Rec conditions on any future grants
And I'll,
in an email to the board. It's our
Right.
job to make sure nothing goes wrong.
right, and none of those, what you emailed to the board, what you just said wasn't one of the options, right?
Well, I think I have to look at the email, but my recollection was we did suggest restrictions. We put like options and,
There were 3 options.
Yeah.
Remember 2 and 3 being less invasive. I guess for something like this, I'd want to make it an organizational decision and not something
Those
the
are the
town
3.
forces to do. Okay.
You are correct.
right. So essentially, they have come up with revised bylaws, which is one of the options that I had proposed was an amendment to the bylaws,
Right?
which is what well, actually, they created bylaws, apparently, as I understood, there were no bylaws previously existing, so they've gone with the option of bylaws, and the bylaws are fine, I think there is a way a future Parks and Rec board might maneuver around them.
Well, you just laid that
Why,
out.
what would be the scenarios that they would want to do that?
If they wanted to sell the property.
If they did, what would be the town's recourse? We'd have to get in front of a judge if
Yeah,
we
I
wanted to,
don't, I don't-
which would be expensive, right?
Or we could just kind of look at it like, well, you know, we gave them a grant and they got their use out of it. And I'm talking about 2 or 3 years. I don't think the board's gonna vote over the next 6 months to dissolve and sell. I just don't get that vibe.
No, not this bunch. They're not going to. You know, that's been something that people have been worried about for years. And they were good enough to change their bylaws. And I'll tell you the truth, I would have been willing to do these lights, even if that hadn't been on the table. I mean, that was something we brought up in conversations before this ever came up. And that was something that I thought, hey, this will be great to, you know, make sure it stays, you know, somebody crooked don't come in. I'm not worried about these folks, not at all. But that don't mean somebody else couldn't come in, you know, and do some kind of play on it. But, you know, it's kind of up to them to, you know, to do that. I'm definitely not, when I started with this, I didn't intend on it to be to force anybody's hand to do anything, just to get some lights up. It is a good thing if that can be fixed, you know, where we take out the possibility of some shyster coming in, but.
Well, Mr. Lander, it is true that a previous Parks and Rec board sold off a portion of that property many years ago. Why they did it and what they did with the money is, you know, not readily discoverable.
Technically.
Mr. Foy, let me bear with me a second. You know, I do know that one of the builders of that park, or one of the founders, or whatever you want to call it, one of the original board members, was under the understanding that not 1 square inch would be able to sold, and is to this day still upset about it. So it's already happened. That's why it's come up in discussion here, and I'm not questioning the intent of any Parks and Rec board member right now. They do, from my observation, a much better job running it than this town council ever did, and better than I could do as a board member there. And I have nothing but admiration for them. Again, it's just our job to make sure that we do everything we can do to protect the town's interests, protect the public money, and that's, you know, this is, if we just give them the money in advance, that's one possibility. So whatever this board decides, I'm down with.
Well, and it may be that Mr. Baumforth intended to, because my recollection of his statement last week was they were going to put these bylaws on record at some point. And maybe his intention was to incorporate these into a restriction on the property. I don't know what he intended to.
He intended to record them, and I think the intent was the restriction on the property and I say that because of the bylaws themselves. Mr. Baumforth's not an attorney, so he didn't know the potential out there. You are, and I appreciate you pointing that out. I would like to make a clarification for the record that Stokesdale Parks and Recreation never sold any of that property. Stokesdale Parks and Recreation was created in 2003. The property was sold in 1985, best I can tell, by Stokesdale Community Park, Inc.
Well, Mr. Foy, I acknowledge the difference between the two organizations, but the fact of the matter is the community paid for that ground, and I don't know what happened, and some of it was sold off, and that's my point. The change from an incorporated board to Stokesdale Parks and Rec is still the same physical property. It's run by essentially a community organization running sports programs for our youth. So,
Well, I don't know anything about Stokesdale Community Park, Inc.
And is there any evidence?
Mr. Foy, I've been in this town a long time. I knew the people that built that park. I did know some of these people, and there's been ups and downs at the park, but as you pointed out, I still don't think this town could run that park nearly as well and nearly as efficiently as the volunteers do. And I believe that to be a fact, absolutely.
Well, you know, if it's the board's intent to tie the bylaws to the property, and I feel like it is, then the board can do that. But I just don't want to tie it to this grant because they have not offered it. They may have implied it, but after hearing what you had to say, they didn't offer it. So I can't include that in my motion. I, as one council member, but more importantly, as a family member of Stokesdale Parks and Recreation, my son's, active in it in the basketball program, would hope that they would do that in terms of protecting the entity in perpetuity, but I don't want to be part of a town council that conditions that. I do think it's important.
Well, I'd like for them to set it up to where nothing could happen, and I believe that's their intention. But there again, that's just something we brought up when we had our initial conversations about doing these lights. And, that was because of the problem they had years ago with the
Right.
5 acres. And, anything is better than nothing. But there again, I really, I know that, we're giving, grant money to them, but, I still would rather council not to get too involved.
Okay,
And I know we're involved with $50,000, but, there again, that's grant money for the community. And that's, as far as I'm concerned, they've been community longer than we have.
Okay.
We just happen to be the ones that's in charge of, distributing it out and
Okay.
all. But, I hope that they will, do something to where it couldn't be sold off in the future. And I really believe that's the intention.
well, Mr. Foy, I'm ready to vote. Let's go ahead and give them the money. We'll see what happens.
Okay, I'll call question. Jim?
Aye.
Am I, Jimmy?
Huh?
Tim?
Aye.
Okay. Congratulations to Parks and Recreation. I know you do the community proud and the town proud. Item number 7 is consideration of a 3% cost of living increase for town staff. I just want to verify with Finance Officer Kim Thacker that the 3% cost of living increase was included in next year's financial budget.
Yes, sir, it was. It is, yes.
All right. With that, I will make a motion that effective July 1st, 2023, that all staff members that have not gotten a promotion in the last 3 weeks get a 3% cost of living increase effective July 1st. And those that got a promotion, the cost of living was factored in.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Is there any discussion?
As painful as this is, I realize staff has to pay their bills and buy groceries and deal with a diminished value of $1 or $2. So I think our citizens would do well to remember that.
Yeah, we have a good staff, and, this is what happens. McDonald's, they want $15 an hour to flip hamburgers, and so the hamburgers go up, and these guys want hamburgers. So we've got to, give them a raise so they can get some hamburgers, and an ice cream sundae, they're $3 now, instead of 99 cents, so that's what happens, and eventually the McDonald's workers are getting $15 an hour, they'll be wanting $20, and then we'll have to do this again. So
It'll be the end of Jimmy Landers going to McDonald's.
it is what it is.
All right, is any further discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. I will call question. Jim?
Aye.
I'm also aye. Jimmy?
Aye.
And Tim?
Aye.
All right, that brings us to council comments. Gentlemen, Jim.
I'd just like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Those of you in the back, appreciate that. Let's keep the 5 people in the submarine in the ocean in our prayers, because they're at the witching hour as we speak. So that's going to be a tough situation regardless how it comes out.
Thank you folks for being here. Thank you staff for all you do and for the time you spent preparing this budget. And I do think it's a lot of money, but it was well examined and looked at and presented. And I thank you. Jimmy?
Well, I'd like to thank our audience, as usual, Parks and Rec for being here. Staff, I'm happy to be living in a town who runs off of, no property tax. We've had folks over the years that's come in and they'll say that we need to do this, we need to do that, and we seem to just keep on kicking down the road and making it, and we've got a great town, and I know we have some things happen, but if, I will take what we have over anywhere around here. We don't have a police force, we work off the sheriff's department. It's a lot of things, a lot of cities have got that people would like to have that we don't have, but there's a lot of things that they've got that we don't want. And I'm glad to be here and I hope we can keep on, I hope we can keep the town going like it's going. And if there's a new council that comes in, these guys will be signing up, but if they want to make changes, campaign on it. Say, hey, we need a property tax, we need this, we need that. Put it out on the table and say it, and then if, you get voted in, do it. But I think we've done pretty good. And good job with the budget, guys. As good as we could do, I reckon. Couldn't get it to zero.
Thank you, Jimmy. Mr. Jones?
Yeah, I'd like to extend my thank you to the 3 citizens that have joined us for our meeting this evening. I truly wonder if the rest of the citizens are just unconcerned or disgusted with us in the sense that they're not here, so they'll let me know, I guess. I remain opposed to a property tax for the town of Stokesdale for the time being. I still hold out some glimmer of hope that the town of Stokesdale will be able to recover at least some of our our sales tax distribution money, either from the county or by act of legislature. It's possible. So until we have to have a tax for some escapable reason, then I remain opposed to it. The local paper made some comments about some statements I made in the last meeting regarding Parks and Rec that I'd like to speak to. I find it amazing how often I'm misquoted, but I'd like to stress to the Parks and Rec representative, and I hope you'll go back and tell your board that I'm very grateful for the Parks and Rec board and the time they put in. I've been to meetings. I have contributed money to the park in the past. I've cut trees. I helped build one of those shelters down there. I don't, as have a lot of people in this town over the many years, and it's an amazing labor of love for the kids that was started many years ago by some old folks that had a vision, and I think overall they would be proud of the existing organization and the way it's running today. And I'm pretty certain, I think they would be proud that it's being accomplished without the direct support of tax money. And I really think that we would do a poor job if we took it over as a town and operated it. I don't think we'd do as good a job, and we'd spend twice as much money. So thank you to the board members down there. That's it.
Thank you, Tim. All right, announcements. The next town council meeting would be Thursday, July the 13th. Okay, at 7 p.m. at Town Hall. Thank you, folks. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Right?
Motion to adjourn, I made that, Jimmy, just before you said second.
You made it.
Okay.
Aye.
And I'm also aye, Jim.
Aye.
E.
Aye.
Tim. Yep.
Hey,
All right, folks, have a good night. The meeting's adjourned.
Hey, you got email addresses short. Don't you have dfoy@gmail.com?
Eric Foy, or D. Foy.